Hi, Gratitude Seeker. Welcome to a new episode of the Gratitude Podcast. With us today, we have some amazing people that have been working their lives, all their lives, to find out more about what makes us feel alive, that what makes us really happy, and have studied what actually makes us live a fulfilled life. And there are a lot of things that um, these amazing people that I'm about to introduce to you have done in their lives um, to share with the world, to experience for themselves, and they're not the typical things that you would expect. And I think this makes them rich, and we will talk about this in a bit. Welcome, Bridget and Joe, to the Gratitude Podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks. We're excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really happy to have you here because I am a big believer in the power of experiences, and it's usually these experiences that make us most grateful. We usually think about all kinds of things that we did, uh, or even things that we experience today, but things that we did that we are grateful for um, when we look back and when we think about the week that has passed, or the weekend, or the month, or the year, or maybe the decade. We think about those experiences. So let us know a little bit more about you, about the things that you've done.
Sure. Bridget, do you want to start off with a little backstory or?
Sure.
Yeah,
I can start off with just a really quick backstory of where I'm from, and then we can converge on how we met and what we've done since then. So I
Perfect.
grew up in kind of a small city in Michigan, in the United States, called Flint, Michigan, and and I grew up just loving music. That was like the love of my life. And I basically did, when I was a teenager, I did every single job that you can think of that was like on the way to the music industry. Like even the really, really horrible ones, like picking up trash at concert venues and like getting coffee for people at radio stations and stuff like that. And I just like worked my butt off and trying to get into the music industry and kind of out of Michigan. As much as I love my family and friends there, I really had this like big dream of like moving to California ever since I was a kid. So I did all those jobs. I eventually got a job at Universal Music Group when I was a teenager. And after the office shut down in Michigan, I ended up moving to LA. And when I was there, in Los Angeles, I ended up seeing a video of a woman hearing for the first time. And it really inspired me to get into social enterprise. And I looked around at all of these companies that were giving back. And there was companies like Tom's and Warby Parker that were like just starting around that time. But nobody was doing anything in music, which was like my big passion in life. And so I saw this video of a woman hearing, and I thought, what if I could just like do that like one time? Like that would be such a huge dream come true. And so long story short, I met Joe around that time, and we started a company that sells headphones and speakers and gives people hearing aids. But Joe can give you like a background on himself, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, that I'll give you the quick Joe story. When I was a kid, right before I turned 18, something happened that was pretty impactful in my life. I had come downstairs to go to school like I had, hundreds of times before. And I found my father slumped over the kitchen table, and he was like white as a sheet and sweating profusely. So we, called the 911, called the ambulance because we assumed he had a heart attack. And he went to the hospital. And long story short, it wasn't a heart attack. He actually had cardiomyopathy, which is this scarring of the heart, and his heart was failing. And this was very sudden. My dad was otherwise totally healthy, normal. So there was no idea that this was coming. So this kicked off like a 2-month nightmare experience for me and my family, where we basically were watching my dad wither away on life support, waiting for a heart transplant. And while this happened, we were pacing the halls in this hospital, and I still remember it so vividly, because we were as we were there, I just kept thinking, this is so wrong. So many people live like this. They're postponing their life, they're postponing their dreams, they're postponing their goals for some future that might not exist. Because my dad definitely had that kind of life. He just worked a lot, and I'm sure he was assuming he would retire and get to do all these things in the future, but he hadn't done really any of his goals and dreams at that point. And again, of course, he was providing for his family, which is no small thing. But we were really fortunate. My dad did get the transplant, and he got a second chance at life to do all the things he wanted to do. But while we were going through that moment leading up to that, it gave me like this great gift of urgency. It showed me that we're not guaranteed this amount of time, because like what was going on with my dad, maybe the health part wasn't avoidable, but the part that was avoidable was all the regrets he would have had for not doing all of these things that he had wanted to do because he thought he'd have more time. So that just set me on this journey where, when my dad started off his bonus round, as he affectionately liked to call his second chance at life, I started just trying to do all the things that I wanted to do in my life, like right then, like with a real amount of urgency. And like Bridget, I grew up in a blue collar family. My parents met working on an assembly line, making brake pads. And, we had a lot of financial instability. So there wasn't a lot of inherent wealth opportunities. So I did every kind of odd job I could to try to give myself, opportunities and ways to just kind of grow things, from like moving furniture to pumping concrete to doing landscaping and construction, just anything I could do. And eventually that led me to the opportunity to start a company with a friend of mine, and that company accidentally turned into a different company. But it was a really funny story. It all starts from an experience. We actually got this little warehouse and made some t-shirts to sell. And we got the warehouse because we wanted to build a skateboard ramp, because we thought it'd be fun to have that experience of skateboarding with, in this company. And that turned into another friend asked if we could help him ship some clothing that he was making. And the long story short with this whole career trajectory is we wound up becoming a shipping company for other brands. So we wound up not even doing the apparel brand very long. But it was a really inspiring time, because I was able to see, like Bridget, other young people start companies that were helping people around the world and giving back in different ways. And I had always thought that philanthropy was some kind of walled garden full of people that were really rich that, went to $100 or $1,000 a plate kind of, charity events and tuxedos, which I never even had any idea how that world worked. So the idea of being able to do something in business was really appealing. And then, a decade went by of me doing this work where I didn't know how to start, didn't know what to do. And then my father actually got sick a second time. And when that happened, that put everything back into focus again. That put everything into this very clear focus of, what am I doing with my life now? And I decided I wanted to not risk waiting any longer. I wanted to do something that had a positive impact in the world. And so I left this company that I was lucky to start. And that's when I met Bridget. I started doing some charity, and she heard about that, and we connected. And to kind of just continue the story that she started, when we connected, she showed me this video of this girl hearing for the first time. And I was like, this is incredible. And she was like, I want to give hearing aids to people. And I was like, that's amazing. I love this. I love music. The idea of people needing hearing is so powerful. And then she said, we could make headphones and speakers because it's tied to music, and we'll sell them and use them to give people hearing aids. And we can go on these, missions with a charity partner and help physically give people hearing aids ourselves. I was like, that sounds absolutely brilliant. I love this. We high-five. I'm not even kidding. We met up at a restaurant. We happened to live really close to each other in Los Angeles. And we met there and went over all this. And afterwards, we actually booked flights and flew to China, went to factories and made headphones. It was just like that quickly. And it was only about a year. It was about 8 months actually later, we were on the ground in Peru giving people hearing and seeing someone hear for the first time, just like in that video. So I'll let Bridget kind of tell that story because it's really powerful. But why don't you tell him this story about Maria, Bridget?
Sure. So it was just the craziest moment. One of the craziest moments of my life is just, having like this dream, like this very far-fetched thing, like, oh, I want to start a company that gives people hearing for the first time. Like that's a very far-fetched thing, at least for me at that time. And for us to like visualize that, and then like 8 months later, we go to Peru, and the first day that we're there, we didn't really know what we were doing. We were like learning throughout the day. And then one of our patients came up with her parents, and it was her 18th birthday. And like her wish for her birthday was to get hearing. Like all she wanted her whole life was that, but her family could never afford it. And so they took her like on a multiple day long journey to get to where we were, so she would have the chance at hearing. And it was just like the most powerful moment ever. Like she sat down in this chair, we gave her hearing aids, and it was just like in the video that we had seen where someone had this like life transformation happen like that, within like 10 seconds. She's like completely can't hear. And then 10 seconds later, she's like, that reaction of like hearing for the first time. And her mom was there, her dad was there, and we were all like crying. We were just like all sobbing together, because it was not only was it like her dream come true, but it was like our dream come true to see that. And ever since that day, that was in 2000, that was pretty much exactly like 10 years ago, we have given over 50,000 kids hearing for the first time. So
Amazing.
not only did we get to see that first one, we've done that many, many, many times over that. And in addition, we've been able to travel to all these places throughout the world that most people don't get to see, because a lot of the time it's in like a rural area. So it's just been the most incredible experience of our lives, and just so powerful. So speaking of gratitude, that's probably the thing I'm most grateful for in my entire life, is just that whole experience.
Definitely. What I love about this, and I'm sure that our listeners have been thinking about this too, like just the fact that you can hear my voice right now, it's something amazing. Like so many people don't get to hear other people's voices. They don't get to experience all the tonalities, all the beautiful music, all the beautiful sounds in the world. And thankfully, there are people like you, Bridget and Joe, that are helping people have this experience. And I think this is amazing, because you get to experience that moment of joy, of gratitude that people feel when they hear for the first time, or they get to hear better, right? Because I think there are situations in which they can hear a bit, but they can't hear well enough, right?
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the number one disability in the world, which
Wow.
it doesn't get like a lot of attention, I feel. Maybe that's just me, but like when we started it, we were looking at all of these causes that got all these attention, and they're all worthy, of course, but there was nobody doing anything in hearing, and it's the #1 disability. And it really holds people back, especially in a lot of these rural places where the kids can't go to school, they can't get jobs, they can't, grow into like a functioning, adult in society. And it really does change their life like immediately. So it was amazing.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And if you have any, so aside from this story from Peru, from when you started, like, do you have a story that really stuck with you, like someone hearing for the first time and how they experienced the sounds, how it made you feel, of course, because you empathize with them. Is there a particular story that you want to share? I think, Joe, you have one in mind.
There's so many, to be honest. There's a lot, but
50,000.
Yeah, there's so many times. But we learned, it was such a growth experience and journey for us, because there was so much that we learned along the way that to be totally honest, we hadn't even thought of some of the things that were going to happen. One of those being that the majority of patients we saw were kids, but there was still a lot of elderly people too as well that had lost their hearing. So that was really something that, obviously we understood that elderly people lose their hearing, but when you start to interact and have these conversations with friends and family members, you realize all of the wisdom and knowledge and connectivity and memories that are lost because of that. So one of the things I remember that was really powerful was there was someone that was they were over 100, and they said they hadn't been able to hear in 40 years, and they were there with their kids and their grandkids and their great grandkids. And after we got the hearing aids on, they started communicating. I remember talking to the granddaughter, and she was like, we don't know any of the history of our family and all these things, and he hasn't been able to share that with us. And she was like, I'm so grateful. And they were just immediately, by the way, having a conversation, and he was laughing, and he was really funny. He was cracking jokes like immediately, like he started just like an old person that doesn't have a lot of cares in the world. He was being so funny. And we were just like, wow, we just reconnected generations
Wow.
that were completely separated. And I'll throw another thing in that was really also interesting, because we were so sure that music is just like this powerful emotional driver and connector. And to your point about, there's people that right now aren't hearing what we're hearing, but they could. So when we would go to missions, we would play music immediately. Right after we got somebody hearing again, we would immediately put some music on. And we were actually on this mission in China, and we were trying to play some music for this older person, and he wasn't really responding too much to the music. And but we were pretty sure that he was hearing well, but he just didn't seem to be emoting very much, I would say. And then we asked one of the people that was volunteering there from China. He said, can you give us some music that's a local music? Because we don't know the music we were in this place called Kunming, China. And they said, oh yeah, and they got out some traditional music that they assured us this gentleman would probably know. And we played that, and it was like night and day. All of a sudden he lit up and just started bobbing his head and smiling and humming along. And we're like, oh, so then, we were very conscious of making sure we had local music for the different types of missions we did, because different people are connected to different types of music. And that's really, I think, the cool thing about the mission that we were on. It was about music as a whole, not like one type of music, and hearing as a whole, as in like the whole planet, not one area. So that was something that was really powerful.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I think music is so powerful when we connect so many memories, so many emotions to music. And I like to do this as well, like with my parents or my girlfriend's parents. I want to put the music that they were listening to, because for them it's harder to access. For me, it's like really easy. I just search for it on YouTube or on Spotify or something, and I can just um, give them this experience, and I can see how emotional it is for them. And I can only imagine how it is for someone uh, in a similar situation from some points of view, not hearing maybe for, I don't know, 20 or 30 years, and being able to hear the songs that connect them to certain experiences, actually, right? As well, because we tend to connect music to certain experiences as well. And yeah, it's, I can only imagine how much joy and gratitude you are able to witness and to experience yourselves.
Absolutely. I mean, music is so interesting when you think about it with memory. Like there's actually a few really good books about that, but I love thinking about that. And I loved seeing the elderly people when they would hear something from that came out in like the 60s or 70s, and they're like just light up, and like they would remember, like they haven't heard that in so long, but they still remember every single like word. And I just think that's so powerful.
I know that you also spent quite a few years interviewing social science experts, conducting studies on life experiences. What can you tell us about some of the findings that you got to?
Sure. So the segue between, so in 2020, as you know, obviously the world shut down, but a lot of things happened in our lives in that year. And I went through like this huge mental health crisis, and Joe had his first baby, and COVID happened.
Congratulations.
I had moved back to Los Angeles, and our nonprofit partner, Starkey, the ones who gave the hearing aids, they actually had like temporarily shut down. Obviously, we couldn't travel around the world and, you know, meet with thousands of people a day. so, so we went through this whole transition period of like, what do we really want to do? Like, what's important to us? If we can't travel and give hearing, you know, what are we going to do with our lives? And we went around and asked a lot of people that we knew and that were close to us, and they were like, the one thing that you guys need to do is tell your stories and like help other people like have these types of experiences. And so we started, you know, asking people that were around us, like, well, what was the best experience of your life? And like, what is like your biggest regret? Or what would you still want to do if you had like more time, or, you know, more money, or like whatever, and kind of just seeing what people said. And it was like so interesting. And some of the answers were really sad, because a lot of people will say things like, I always wanted to go to the next state over. And it's like, well, it's only 2 hours away. It's very possible. But after we asked our friends and family those questions, we decided to go bigger with it. And we started a survey, and we ended up getting over 20,000 responses around those same questions. And that's kind of what formed a lot of the basis of the book that we started writing. So it was a really, really cool experience just to ask. And a lot of the people that we asked were elderly. And I think that obviously, you know, they have the most wisdom. And to ask an elderly person, like, what was the most impactful experience of your life? You know, they never said anything like my bank account or my, you know, buying a watch or anything like that. It was always something super heartfelt, like, you know, when I took my wife on vacation to Italy, or like something around an experience was like the number one answer. So we kind of took all of those learnings and put them into the book. So.
And that actually, it was such a natural next step, because while we were on that, you know, 10-year mission of traveling the world and giving people hearing aids, people kept coming up to us and saying, "Oh my God, you guys must be you must be so rich. You must be, killing it. You must be, millionaires X times over, etc." And we weren't. We were giving all of our money to our charity partner to buy hearing aids. So it probably looked from the outside like we were rich because we were having all of these amazing experiences. So we started just telling people when they would say those things to us, we'd say, well, we're more like experiential billionaires, because that's what we were chasing. That's what we wanted. We wanted to fill our life with experiences because our time was the most valuable thing. And we had this understanding, I guess, of that. We were trying to get as much in with our time and build that, wealth of experiences. So when it came time to start, actually getting into the science and data and, writing the book, it was really interesting because like Bridget just said, when you ask people, they know this. This is something that they actually inherently understand, but for some reason humans just have some kind of glitch in their code where they don't act accordingly. We know it, but then we'll just go work nonstop as though that's going to solve all of our problems, and at some point in the future it's going to all make sense. But if you actually stop and really think about it, if you ask anybody, what would you do if you had 1 year left to live? They're not thinking about, doing, they're not going to say, I'm going to work 60 hours a week. That's for sure. They're going to make a list of all these experiences they want to try and have. And even the stuff that, requires investing time and money, those are the things that we still put off and postpone because we're afraid, and we have all these excuses or reasons that stop us from doing it. And so when we wrote the book, it was really, really fun because we were able to break down all of the reasons people don't have these experiences that they know they want to have and they know will be so valuable. And we created all these tools and all these exercises to get through that, to get past it. Because when we started doing all the research, it was overwhelming the number of people that had all of these end of life regrets or regrets in general. Definitely the majority of people, usually in the 70s or 80% kind of number. But we could see the difference with the people that didn't have those regrets, what they were doing differently and what we had done differently. So that was actually a really cool thing to see. Say, well, what makes some people experientially rich while other people wind up experientially bankrupt and then out of time.
And the number one reason for being experientially bankrupt was that people said that they would get around to it someday, right? So they thought that they would have more time. No one has that much time, I guess. There's always a finite amount of time in our life, right? But so if you keep putting something off forever, it's never going to happen. So that's kind of the whole theme and basis around experiential billionaire, is that time is running out for everyone. So do the things that you want to do now and don't wait until someday, because then you're going to end up like the 76% of people at the end of their life, where they're wishing that they did all the things they didn't do. People don't regret the things that they did do usually. All of the data that was coming back to us from the survey and from other people's, papers and universities and whatnot, is that the regret is the things that they did not do. So we're trying to help people do the things they want to do now and not someday.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's really, the obvious things that everybody actually says, the big excuses, we call it the excuses hall of fame, but it's, I don't have the time, I don't have the money. And then of course it's like, I just didn't get around to it. But the time and money thing, again, Bridget and I, we weren't born into some, trust fund situation. We get it. And it's interesting because everybody doesn't have to climb Mount Everest. If that's your goal, great. But there's so much you can do. There's so many enriching experiences that don't cost any money and that are not that much time that could lead you into another level of a higher value experience maybe in the future. But you have to start taking those steps. And people, I think, they put off those little things, because they're just like, well, one day I'm going to go on. I'm going to travel the world. That's a great example. Lots and lots of people say, I'm going to travel the world one day. First of all, that's not specific. That's like a very general term. Second of all, we've been to like 52 countries. I can tell you right now, it takes a very long time to travel the world. So you better start now. But start with what you can do. You don't have to start with your big bucket list. So I think that's been something that Bridget and I have really enjoyed trying to show people that they can do, and by being examples, because we didn't have all of the resources. We had the same constraints most people had. And I share that story of my dad for two reasons. For one, because he actually did go on to like live a pretty, experientially rich second chapter of his life, which is in the book, and it's really inspirational. But two, the other reason is because not everybody gets that chance, right? And most people have someone, or they have a situation that they've been a part of where the person didn't actually get the transplant, and something happened that changed someone's life forever. And I think that's why it's those people that have the near-death experience that go on to run the marathon, or to climb the mountain, or to chase their dreams, because they've been made aware of that urgency. So we're trying to give people that urgency minus the near-death experience.
That's wonderful. And I think it's something so interesting that we get to appreciate things when we're either we lost them, or we were close to losing them, like in life in general. Like if we think about the fact that we are not actually aware enough of the fact that life is unfortunately quite fragile, and we're not promised to live like 100 years for 100 years or something. And I think this is where gratitude helps us out as well, because when we appreciate life itself, we tend to appreciate the experiences more. And like you mentioned, they don't have to be huge experiences, quite complicated experiences, or very expensive experiences, for us to appreciate them, and for them to bring us fulfillment. Of course, there are the big things, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time that we would get responses like, all I wanted to do my whole life was play guitar or paint a painting, and things like that, or like learn how to make pasta, or take a hike, in my town. And all of those things are almost free. Like, none of them cost a lot of money, and they could cost a lot of time. Learning to become the best guitarist costs a lot of time, but if you just want to learn one song, it doesn't cost very much time. So why do we put off all of these things that don't take money or time, and then use those excuses? It's very interesting.
And I think there's a lot of similarities to the mindfulness type of mentality, where a lot of the things are solved by being present. When you're aware of like the present moment and using your time in the present, you can recapture a lot of control and do a lot of the things that are meaningful to you. But when you're not aware and you're not present, that's when what we call time thieves step in and start taking your time. We live in like a world where there's so many things that have been very, very cleverly designed to take our attention, to keep our attention, and they're not good for us. While technology has tons of benefits, nobody can argue that, there's a lot of sides of it that we could totally do without and be better people for. And when you start to remove those things that have negative, effects, you have the time back to then put things in those places that are really positive for you. So, for instance, maybe you scroll on your phone and get depressed by seeing all these people that live these fake perfect lives that aren't, by the way, even true. That's what people do a lot. Instead, if you just got out, for instance, and started, like Bridget's been doing a practice this whole last year of, she gets up every single morning and watches the sunrise and goes for a walk on the beach. Like, doing that every day is going to be so valuable to you versus the alternative, doing something that's actually probably going to make you feel bad. But you have to like identify those things, and by being present and having gratitude for the moments, the little moments, that's how you can make those changes.
Yeah, that's actually my gratitude practice is every sunrise and sunset that I'm home, I try to like walk on the beach and just watch it and just be in the moment and think about like, you know, in the beginning of the day, it's like, what am I grateful for? At the end of the day, it's like, what am I grateful for that happened today? Even if it was like a really bad day, it's like, I can still be grateful for whatever is happening. Like my health, for example, it's like, even if I had a bad day, I'm still healthy, and that's amazing. And I love what you said about most people think they have 100 years and it's all good, but the reality of the situation, it's horrible to say, but if this is the truth, is that the average lifespan is 76 years. It's 74 for men and 78 for women in the United States. I'm not sure about Romania, but it varies slightly in different countries. But when we speak to people, they're always surprised about hearing this because they have this idea in their head that midlife is 50, but midlife is actually 38. So you have less time than you think, and I think that you know, I love that you brought that up because I think about that every day, and that's part of my gratitude practice is to be grateful for the time that I have because I never know when it's going to run out.
Exactly. Yeah.
We have a memento mori, which means remember you must die, a chart in the book that, you know, we encourage people to fill out and take a picture of, but you know, it's got the 76 blocks on it, so you can mark how many years you've lived, and you can see visually if you're average how many you have left. And you know, that's powerful. It's especially because then you can start to do the math that's associated, right? Where if it's like I've got 20 blocks left, but I see my parents only twice a year, that means I'm going to see them only 40 more times. You know, oh, okay, that seems a little more urgent than I thought. Or I want to go, you know, travel to these 20 places. Well, if I don't start now, and if I do one a year, you know, that's the most I'm possibly going to be able to do. And what if I want to go back and see somewhere twice, et cetera? So, you know, that's the urgency stuff we're trying to like get people to understand. And it's really not morbid. We're not advocating like dwelling on the actual concept of death. It's really contemplating that you're going to die. That's one thing we all know. We're all going to die. So take the time to just really think about it enough to prioritize, and that's powerful. That's such a powerful tool to, you know, to help people put their priorities in order.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be morbid. It's like, think about, like, I don't have kids, but Joe has kids. And I think about that a lot with the memento mori chart. It's like, if you have a child that's 9 years old, say, and like, you're like, I really want to take my kid on a national park road trip throughout the US. Then you look at this chart and you're like, oh, there's only 9 more summers that they're going to be living at home, you know, like, so I have to do it relatively soon if I want to do this. And a lot of people don't think in that urgency way. And I think that, you know, it doesn't have to be morbid. It can be like just inspirational.
And just like your point about the 100 years, people think they're going to live to be 100. They also think they're going to be healthy the whole time. They think, oh, I'm going to be 85 and I'm going to be ready to go to, you know, Italy and hike up and down 200 stairs every 4 hours. You know, like that's not realistic. And the same thing with kids. You know, I'm going to take my kids on a road trip. Your kids might not even want to go on a road trip with you when they're 16. They might not even want to. They want to hang out with their friends. Yeah, probably not. So, you know, just being practical of that. You know, it's so important to seize those opportunities to build that wealth in the moment, because you're going to be really grateful for it later.
Exactly. And like you said, these experiences actually make us rich, and it's really interesting to think about it, because in many situations we think that we need to get to a certain level of some sort before we get to have these kinds of experiences. Like, we put all kinds of blockers in our path, when in many situations we can just have those experiences and choose them. And I think that your example is very powerful and it works quite well with people that tend to be more workaholic. Like if you think about the deadline, like if you have some tasks that you need to get done by the end of the day or by the end of the week, you know that you need to prioritize them, right? If you think, oh, I should do this or I should do that whenever, it's like there are gonna be so many other things that are going to take your attention, and you're gonna go in a
I mean,
totally
that's
different direction.
the classic situation is that people say, I'll do it when the kids are older. I'll do it when I, graduate. I'll do it when there's always like an excuse that they'll do something once something happens. Like I'll do it once I get a raise, once I, retire. There's always like this, I'll do it when, but what if that like when never comes? Or what if it does and then you're not healthy enough to do something? So, yeah.
Yeah, having it on your calendar makes it real, right? So we're that's a very big part of the process we tell people. So if you don't pick a day, even to start planning it, maybe you can't plan it all at once. Maybe it is a big thing, maybe it's something that requires more time. You can figure out what the first steps are and you can put those on your calendar and then you can start taking those steps. But if you don't put it on your calendar, you're not going to do it. And that's really, I think, the problem that most people face, and they don't realize it's happening until a bunch of time has already slipped away. And it's interesting too, because a lot of people use responsibility, and especially financial responsibility, as a big excuse. It's like, well, I've got to take care of my kids and my family, and so I've got to work a lot. This is so important. I want this to really sink in for everybody. It's not one or the other. Your experiences, it's not investing in experiences. And by investing, I mean like your time and your energy, not actually cash money. But it's not like investing in experiences versus investing in your financial well-being or your career trajectory, because they're actually pretty linked. Your value as a person, as a human, as an employee, as a partner, as a friend goes up when you have more life experiences, because you have more things to relate to the world, more wisdom to share, you're more interesting. So there's tons of studies around that show the correlation between having more life experiences and actually having a better financial outcome in the long term, especially because experiences, this is the most important one, experiences are how we bond, how we form strong relationships. So by doing things with other people, we become very close. Everybody has those stories of that person that you went on a trip with, or you were at a concert with, or you did something with, where it was an intense experience that now you shared with someone. So now that person is really, really close to you. And now those people are in your camp. That's going to be the person that calls you for the job opportunity or the new business endeavor or whatever else. So those things actually, I think, are very linked together.
Yeah, I mean, look at like if I was interviewing for a job, or if I was, had a date, for example, it's like versus someone else, and I was up against someone else for this opportunity. Like the person with more stories and more goals and more dreams and more things to speak about is going to get that job, is going to get that date or whatever it is, versus someone that sits at home on their phone and doesn't really have a lot of stories or life experiences. I think it's really interesting to think about it in that way, and why investing in experiences is important, because it does help your job. It does help your relationships. It helps everything around you. And there's actually a thing called neophilia, which I think is very interesting. It's a trait that's about being open to new experiences, and it makes you actually live longer. So I always thought that was like really cool when we were researching the book, that it's like literally proven that you will live longer if you have more experiences.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I really wanted to get in right now, because I think firstly it's a great motivator. So whenever you have experiences, you get to do the things that you actually wanted to do, to have the experiences that you wanted to have. You're more motivated to do the other things that have to do with life, and that's amazing. And the second thing is that I feel that the amazing thing that you're doing that was missing is that um, our parents tell us that we need to be responsible, we need to work, we need to focus on studying, on the work we're going to do, so that we'll have stability and we will basically survive, because this is usually the main concern. And society in general, the media wants us to buy stuff, you know. So it's so powerful that you guys come with a new perspective, in the sense that, okay, of course you need some things, physical things, of course you need to work, but also it's very important that you focus on experiences, on the things that you actually want, aside from reaching specific goals like career goals, or different kinds of goals that aren't actually in this area of experiences, of things that you actually wanted to experience.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about like physical goods and how society just wants us to buy everything, which is so true. But I like to think about how, you know, if I buy something like say I buy like a piece of clothing or a car or something, that's only going to like depreciate in value over time. And if I have an experience, that only grows in value, because the longer that you have that memory, the more it grows in, like, you know, like I think about the first time that we like went on safari, or like when I saw the Northern Lights, or, you know, like when I learned how to play guitar when I was a kid. Like, and I think about those things and I'm like, oh my God, like it just grows in my memory. And I just like, I love that I did those things, versus I'm not going to think about something that I bought in 10 years. Like that's not even going to be in my memory at all. And if it is, it's probably like because it was a negative experience.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting too that you brought up like how our parents, condition us, and how one of the things we hear a lot. People always ask me, well, how do you do this stuff if you have kids and a family? And my answer is actually pretty simple. And I think that we all want to tell our kids, just like we wanted to be told, that you can do whatever, you can be whatever you can dream you can be. You can, have this, experience rich life, but you want your kids to be responsible. But if I tell my kids, you can go and have all these experiences in life, but then I actually just work all day, every day, and never do anything myself, my kids aren't going to do what I tell them. They're going to do what I did, but basically how I led by example. So we have like this really, important responsibility as parents to make sure and do things so our kids realize that that is as important. And I think this goes back to what you were saying a bit before about the calendar. The problem that people have, that's the mind shift that needs to happen, is your experience they're not just wants. Your experiences are needs. They're actual needs, just like, everything else, every other need in your life. So you need to put them on your calendar, just like you would put, I've got to be at work at 8:00 in the morning. I've got to do this thing. I've got to do this experience that I've, said is so important to me. That is what is going to matter in your life. So you have to shift from like, that's a nice, that would be nice to have, to that's a must have, and I just have to figure out how to do it. I've got to put it on the calendar with that same type of priority.
Yeah, every year I make a list of things that I want to do that year, and the priorities like are extremely even. Like if I put, like last year it was like, finish our book. Of course, huge life experience, like one of the greatest things I've ever done in my life. But there's also like right along with that, it was like go to India, So I'm not putting like the things that I really want to do experientially like below my professional accomplishments. Like I think both are very important, but I think people don't ever put deadlines on personal goals. And that's the problem, is like they'll be like, I want to go to India someday. But I was like, I want to go to India this year, and I'm going to take the steps to make that happen. And that's just as important as like, you know, a promotion at a job or something like that.
Yeah. And the book is a great example of that. Was a really big bucket list, big ticket kind of item in our experiential wealth, you know, goals list. So we actually had to shift things around. I sacrificed some other things that I also wanted to do because that was a heavy lift. That was something that I knew was going to take a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of effort. And that's part of, you know, constantly looking at, you know, what we call your treasure map and figuring out which things you're going to do and in what order. And once you do that, you'll be just shocked at what you can accomplish. You know, the amount of things that we've checked off our list that if you had told me that 20 years ago, I'd been like, there's absolutely no way that's ever going to happen. I'm never going to be able to do that. And now they're checked off. Like I did it. Some of them I did twice, you know, like, wow, like that's amazing. You know? So that kind of stuff is really powerful.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to circle back to what you said a few minutes ago, and I think that's very powerful. And I wanted to get to that, and I'm so happy that you did. Before me getting to explain that, you gave a great example. So I think as parents, like you said, the best way to teach kids is by actually doing those things, by actually living the life that you want, and going for those experiences that you really want, because they will see that, and they will do that themselves as they grow up. And I think this is actually, in a way, it's like an inheritance, you know, like even if it's not money, it's something that they keep within themselves, and they of course pass along that, hopefully, to their children. And I think that's so powerful. And regarding what you said, Bridget, I think the fact that we are focusing, like with gratitude, you know, like we can be focusing on the bad things in our life, or we can be thankful for the good things. We are thinking about, okay, what are the things that I'm grateful for? We will find all kinds of things that would go on the list. And I think it's similar to what you said. Okay, if you say, okay, I want to go to India this year, we have so many resources at our disposal that we use in other directions that can lead us to that, if we just go for it, if we just put a deadline to it. And I think it's amazing how simple these things seem, at least, but how powerful they are. And one of the things that we do here on the Gratitude Podcast, at the end of each year, we look at each month of the year, and we look for 3 experiences that we enjoyed, that we're grateful for in each month. And I think it just makes the way we look at the year that has just passed in a totally different way, you know. So I think this is powerful, because we tend to forget some of these things that we did firstly, and when we think about the year that has passed, but also we feel much more enriched when we think about all of the things we actually did. And like you said, Joe, we sometimes are in awe of all of the amazing things that have happened in that year. It's amazing, you know.
Yeah. And when you look back, every one of those amazing journeys, every single one, it started with one little step, one little forward progress, one little bit of forward motion. And that's really it's so cool to break stuff down and look back and be like, I'm so glad I took that first tiny step. I overcame that fear. I planned that. I gave myself permission. You know, like there's so many things that we it's so easy to not make that step, to not get over the starting line. But once you actually get good at identifying all of the roadblocks, it's much easier to start looking back and seeing, oh yeah, this happened because I overcame that fear, and I called out that anxiety that I had and said, that's not true, that's fake, I'm telling myself some narrative. Or it's just really interesting how once you get moving like that, you can use that so effectively and become so much more capable. And I want to say one more thing about the gratitude part. I think that we really I can't really explain how deeply we feel about this, but we wrote this book because we strongly feel like this is the most powerful thing we can do in the world. Like, we think this can transform people's lives. And, with the book being a tool to do that, that's our goal. We're going to talk to as many people as we can and try to change people's priorities. But anyone that lives their dreams a little bit more, and that executes, that does something like that's inspirational and aspirational, whether you realize it or not, when you do that, you're affecting all the people around you. People see that and they think, that's amazing, so-and-so did that thing and it inspired me to do this now, and I'm going to try. And you're giving other people permission, you're showing people by example. So you can't underestimate the ripple effect even just like one person can have. If one person at a company runs a marathon that nobody thought could run a marathon, everybody else is, what could I do that I didn't think I could do? There's just so many examples of that. So I think that having gratitude for the people around you for inspiring you, I definitely feel like we've been really fortunate to come across folks that have really inspired us, and we hope we can do that for other people.
Definitely. I know Bridget has something to add to this.
It just got me thinking about the last chapter in our book is called How to Live Forever. And it's about exactly what Joe was just talking about. And I think that's such an important concept to think about. Maybe you can't donate $1 million to a charity. Not very many people can, right? But you could talk to a stranger, or ask someone how their day was, and just little things that are free that could have a small ripple effect. Or you could do something big. But I just think it's so important to always think about how grateful you are for your life and what's happening today, and how you can give that ripple effect every single day.
Exactly. So unfortunately, we're nearing the end of our time together. I really had a lot of fun talking with you guys, and I'm really happy that we got to meet and speak about this beautiful topic. And I wanted to ask you, where can our audience find the book? Where can they get in touch with you?
Sure. So you can go to experientialbillionaire.com. We also have the same name on Instagram, and my personal website is bridgethilton.com, and Joe's is joehuff.com.
Perfect. So thank you so much for being here with us, for sharing your amazing story and the amazing things that you've done. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you
very much. It was really wonderful. Thanks for having us on.